The first time I saw Lieutenant Grayburn was when we came out of the house where McDermott was killed and his Batman, and I was lucky enough to get up the stairs because Lance Corporal Dodds had fired at this German, knocked him out. I went through the door and gave him one, and but we were ordered out of that house because we'd had so many casualties. I went down under the bridge, and there was this lieutenant, badly wounded. He got 4 wounds. He got a bullet through the shoulder. He got a bandage round his head. He got his arm in a sling. He was firing his pistol with his left hand, and he got a bandage round his knee. And that's the very first time I'd ever seen the man. And I thought, well, what a state he's in. But we were under this bridge, just a few of us left at the time, perhaps half a dozen. And this German tank was firing. It was only 30 yards either to that door, 30 yards away. He was firing not at us, he was firing at the beams under the bridge and dropping these lumps of concrete down. He actually hit one of the men there and knocked him out, and that left just Lieutenant Grayburn and myself with weapons. Now, I'd got no ammunition. I'd got 1 round of ammunition left in my rifle. And Lieutenant Grayburn said, he said, it's time we got out of here. There's only us 2. Tapped me on the back. So I ran across the road, and I made it to the wreckage of the houses over there. But Lieutenant Grayburn, of course, they'd seen me go across, so they were waiting for the next one to go across. And they machine gunned him and knocked him down right out in the middle of the road. And I knew he wasn't dead, and I shouted to him, "How bad is it?" And he said, get away, don't come out here," he said. "Get away back to the battalion and help the battalion." But I didn't. He was a wounded comrade, and so I crawled out to him, led beside him, put my hand over the top of his, and held his hand to let him know I was there. He was completely conscious, but it was so obvious he was dying. So I led beside him there for a while, and he still kept on to me, get away. And I mean, he was an officer, he'd given me an order, I had to go. Which, even to this day, I've got a conscience about leaving a wounded comrade. But he was an officer, so I left him. And he died soon after that, apparently. I didn't see him die. I got away and went in through the wreckage and went into a cellar, and there I met 4 men that I knew. Sergeant Joy, Corporal Orris, and it was Orris, not Horace, a private who was our storekeeper, I forget his name, Scottish name. And there was this young lad from the WWII who'd been following me around all day. He'd been a good comrade to me. He wasn't a fighting soldier, but he kept warning me, "There's a Jerry on your right," or wherever. And I was able, and he saved my life half a dozen times by warning me. And we were all in this cellar together. And I heard someone from what had been battalion headquarters across the road. Somebody shouted out, "Waho Muhammad," which was our battle cry. And the Germans in the wreckage, above, just immediately above the cellar, they shouted out, "Come out, Englanders, we will fight you." Got nothing to fight with. So we kept quiet, and we managed to stay there until it got dark, and then we crept out. I broke my rifle in half so that they couldn't use it. And we went away through on our stomachs. I mean, German patrols were in the street on the opposite side. We just crawled and crawled very slowly. I was the last man simply because I'd got a fighting knife. Other than that, we got no weapons whatever. And we crawled quite a long way, mile and a half, right up to halfway to Oosterbeek, where there was a place called the Muses Sacrum. Everybody knows it. Sacred hall where they do hymn singing and whatnot. And it was getting light. And we could hear, we were thirsty, our tongues were hanging out. So although it was getting light, we dashed across the road to this house that we could hear water running. And but the Hun up the road had seen us. They came down there with a couple of machine guns and trained them on the cellar where we were. And Englanders, come out. Englanders had to go out. There was no weapons. They'd got the weapons, we hadn't. They were very young lads, actually, 15, 16-year-old Hitler Youth. Took me prisoner. Took 5 of us prisoner. And they didn't even search us. They were very friendly. They never even searched us for hidden weapons. And they marched us down the road a little way. Now, on the way down the road, I saw some bodies covered on the side of the road, and I tried to go across and see who it was, because I suspected I knew. And one of the guards, "Oh, get back in line, back in line." But Sergeant Joy told me that the man who was led there dead was Sergeant Sidney Power. Now, Sidney Power and I had had a little episode. We charged across a road to drive the Germans out. And knowing that the Germans liked to get upstairs and fire down, I went straight upstairs. But there was no Germans there. Sid Power realized that they would have been overwhelmed. So he shouted to everybody, "Get out, get out." And they left. But I was on the top floor by myself, a house full of Germans. And Sid realized, because he said, "Well, where's Steve? Where's Steve?" And they said, "Oh, he's still in there." So he came across the road himself with his Sten gun and charged in, him and a couple of blokes, and shouted out, "Steve, get out, get out." Of course, I went flying down the stairs as quick as I could and got out, and he came out, and he was... we got back across the other side of the road without any more casualties, but that was Sid led under that blanket. He'd been killed at a later date. Sergeant Sidney Power, which, there we go, if your pals get killed. I was lucky to get away with it myself. But was taken up the road to this, what was their German company headquarters. It was in a church. It'd been used as a dressing station. We knew it British had been in there because all the bandages were linen or cotton, but German bandages were always crepe paper. And anyway, they took us in there, and then they brought a lorry along and took us up to a railway station where we stayed the night, put us on a train the next day and took us back into Germany. That's my first experience, well, my only experience with Lieutenant Grayburn. There was just him and I under the bridge.